When my CEO son raised his glass at Christmas and announced to the whole family that he was sending me $12,000 a month out of gratitude, I was supposed to feel proud. Instead, I just stood there politely smiling while everyone clapped, with one question pounding in my head. What money? Because in my 68 years, working night shifts on a forklift to make ends meet, I had never seen a single cent of that generous allowance. What I found out later made me realize I was just a pawn in a much dirtier game than I ever imagined. Before we go on, drop a comment letting us know where you're watching from. My name is Gerald Thompson, and if there's one thing I've learned in nearly 7 decades on this earth, it's that honesty is non-negotiable. I grew up in a time when a handshake was worth more than any contract, when a man's word was his most valuable asset. For 30 years, I worked as a public accountant here in Plano, Texas, managing the finances of small business owners who trusted me to keep their books straight. Not once in my entire career did I allow a single cent to move without proper documentation and full transparency. That's how I was able to sleep peacefully every night. I never accuse anyone without being absolutely certain of the facts. That's always been a core principle of mine. After the divorce 15 years ago, I had to basically start over. Alimony and mounting debts ate up most of my savings, forcing me into partial retirement much earlier than I'd planned. But I never grew bitter about it. I learned that dignity has nothing to do with the size of your bank account. It's about how you face life's hardships. My 2-bedroom apartment might be modest, and my 2008 Ford may creak around the corners, but I pay my bills on time and don't owe anyone any favors. I work the night shift operating a forklift at a construction materials warehouse. It's not glamorous, but it's honest work. I've always been proud of the son I raised. Luca grew up watching me work hard, be on time, treat people with respect, and never make promises I couldn't keep. When he told me about his startup focused on logistics software, I was genuinely impressed by his drive. I may not understand all the technical details, but I know passion when I see it. It's only natural for an old father to feel proud seeing his son build something from scratch, lead a team, speak confidently about innovation. Even with our different lifestyles, I truly believed I had passed on the right values to him. At least, that's what I thought. My relationship with Aubrey was always more formal, but respectful. She's a smart woman, also trained in accounting like me, with a focus in tax consulting. In the few conversations we had about work, I could tell she knew her stuff. She asked the right questions, understood the regulations, and spoke the language of numbers fluently. That gave me peace of mind, knowing Luca had someone competent handling the financial side of things. Within the family, she was always polite to me, but kept a certain distance that I chalked up to shyness. It never crossed my mind that there could be other reasons behind her reserve. My routine is simple, but it gives me purpose. I wake up at 10 at night, brew a strong coffee, drive 15 minutes to the warehouse, and work from 11 to 7 in the morning. During breaks, I chat with coworkers, most of them men around my age who also had to reinvent their careers after turning 50. We head home as the sun comes up, tired but content after another day of honest work. On Sundays, I go to the Methodist church I've attended for over 2 decades. That's where I find my community, people who know me by name, who ask about my health, who share in the simple joys of everyday life. Christmas dinner was held in the private hall of the downtown Marriott, a setting Luca had picked to impress some investors. I showed up in my old Ford, parked between BMWs and Teslas, and already felt out of place before I even walked in. The room was elegantly decorated, with crystal tables and expensive flowers. Luca greeted me with a warm hug, dressed in a suit that probably cost more than my monthly paycheck. Aubrey looked stunning in a black dress, gave me a polite hello, but her eyes quickly shifted to other guests. It felt like I was just a social obligation to check off before the real business started. Throughout dinner, the conversation revolved around tech and investments. I tried to keep up, asking questions about the business, but the answers were short and condescending. "Dad, it's too technical to explain quickly," Luca would say with a smile that never quite reached his eyes. The other guests tolerated me out of politeness, their faces making it clear I was the out-of-place relative. Aubrey occasionally translated some of the tech terms for me, always using that tone adults use with children. I smiled and thanked her, swallowing the quiet humiliation. Then Luca stood up for a toast. He tapped his crystal glass, drawing everyone's attention. I want to talk about family and gratitude, he began with his usual eloquence. My father taught me the values that brought me here. That's why 2 years ago, I started sending him $12,000 a month. The room burst into applause. People who barely knew me came over to congratulate me, saying how proud I must be. But I was confused. What $12,000? Aubrey's reaction was what really caught my eye. The second Luca mentioned the amount, I saw it out of the corner of my eye. Her tan complexion turned visibly pale, almost gray. She swallowed hard, clutched her napkin so tightly her fingers shook. Our eyes met for a split second, and I saw pure panic in hers. She quickly looked away, forced a smile, and drank water like her life depended on it. It was like someone had spoken a secret she was desperate to keep buried. A deceitful daughter-in-law was starting to reveal herself right in front of me, even if I didn't fully understand what was going on yet. When people congratulated me on my son's generosity, I just smiled and thanked them. But inside, a storm was brewing. 12 grand a month for 2 years? That's $300,000. If that were true, I wouldn't be driving a 16-year-old car, working graveyard shifts on a forklift, counting pennies to pay bills. Have you ever had that moment when you start to wonder if your own family might be lying to you? It eats at you from the inside, makes you question everything you thought you knew. I drove home in silence, determined to uncover the truth behind that phantom money. The Monday after Christmas, I started my own quiet investigation. During a break on my night shift, I called the bank where I've kept my checking account for over 20 years. The rep was polite, but firm. There was no record of any $12,000 monthly deposits in my account. Not in the past 2 years. Not ever. I asked her to double-check, told her it might be a different account under my name. She searched the entire system, absolutely nothing. My stomach sank in a way I'd never felt before. Over the next few days, I began reviewing every financial detail of my life through the lens of a seasoned accountant. I combed through statements, receipts, payment records, anything that could offer a clue about this mysterious 12K allowance. My routine didn't change. Wake up at 10 at night, black coffee, drive to the warehouse, operate the forklift until sunrise. But now, every bill I paid, every penny I counted for groceries, every time I heard my old car creak around a turn, it all stung in a completely new way. That's when I decided to call Luca directly, on a Thursday afternoon. I picked a time I knew he'd be at the office, focused on the startup. When he answered, his voice was upbeat and professional as always. "Hey, Dad. How are you? How was work last night?" I took a deep breath and got straight to the point. "Son, about that allowance you mentioned at Christmas, I need to understand how it's supposed to work." There was a strange pause on the other end. The tone of the conversation instantly shifted from warm to cautious. "What do you mean, Dad?" His voice grew noticeably tenser. "Well, I'm just not seeing that money show up in my bank account. Maybe there's a glitch in the system." Another pause, longer this time, like he was carefully crafting a response. "Dad, are you okay?" Sometimes those things take a while to process. Each reply sounded more evasive than the last. He started talking about complex banking processes, delayed transfers, complicated tax matters. After 3 decades managing corporate finances, I knew what I was hearing. Polished professional nonsense. By the time I hung up, my suspicion had hardened into bitter certainty. My own son was lying to my face, and there was likely a whole lot more dirt behind this story. That night, as I drove my noisy old Ford back home after another exhausting shift, one question kept pounding in my head. If he wasn't sending that money to me, then what the hell was he doing with it? That's when I remembered something Aubrey had mentioned casually during Christmas dinner. She had talked about how it was important for businesses to optimize tax benefits through family assistance. At the time, I thought it was just some technical consultant speak, but now those words hit completely differently in my mind. I started connecting the dots, Luca's public announcement about his generosity, Aubrey turning pale when she heard 12K, my son's evasive answers. Could they be using my name in some kind of elaborate tax scheme? The possibility made me feel completely nauseous and furious at the same time. In my 30 years as a public accountant, I saw business owners try to cheat the system in all sorts of creative ways, but I never imagined my own son could be involved in something like that. That night, working alone on the forklift in the cold, silent warehouse, I felt the weight of my 68 years like never before. The loneliness of the night amplified every dark thought running through my head. Was I being used as a front, manipulated, turned into some kind of financial cover without my knowledge? Over the next few days, I tried to keep my routine going like normal, but it was impossible. During the endless night shifts, my mind kept drifting back to the disturbing situation. I talked less with my coworkers, came home more exhausted than usual, and couldn't sleep properly during the day. My neighbor Dorothy noticed I wasn't myself and asked directly if something was wrong. I told her the whole complicated situation, leaving out no important detail. Dorothy listened in respectful silence, and when I finished, she let out a deep sigh. "Gerald, honey, this doesn't sit right with me. You need to get to the bottom of this, fast." That entire weekend I was too restless to get the proper rest I usually did. I knew I needed to take a concrete step, but I wasn't sure what that was. I couldn't keep living with this horrible doubt eating away at my mind. On Sunday after church, I sat on the park bench where I always feed the pigeons and thought deeply about everything. There I was, a 68-year-old man working exhausting night shifts to survive, driving an old car, living in a modest apartment, while my son was publicly announcing he was sending me a small fortune every month. The contrast was way too absurd to ignore or rationalize in any way. If I had really been receiving $12K a month as he claimed, I'd have over $280,000 saved up in 2 full years. I could have retired completely, bought a comfortable new car, moved into a nicer and more spacious apartment. Instead, I was still counting pennies just to pay the basic monthly bills. That quiet Sunday afternoon, I made a decision that would change everything. I was going to find out the truth, no matter the cost. It didn't matter that it was my son. It didn't matter how much it might hurt emotionally. On Monday morning after my night shift, I didn't go straight home like I always did. I drove to the busy center of Plano, parked in front of the courthouse, and just sat there for nearly an hour, watching the steady flow of people coming and going. Well-dressed lawyers, government workers, people handling complicated legal matters. Would I need legal help too? Had my own son dragged me into something serious that might require court intervention? The thought terrified me, but at the same time, it sparked a strange sense of rising determination. That night, before heading out for another shift, I grabbed a sheet of paper and started writing down everything I knew so far, methodically. Luca's public announcement about the generous allowance, Aubrey's pale and shaken reaction, the evasive and suspicious conversation with my son, the undeniable fact that I had never seen a single cent of that money. When I finished organizing it all, I looked at the detailed list and realized I had enough evidence to reasonably suspect that something was seriously wrong. Can you imagine the pain of realizing that maybe your own child is using you? That's exactly how I felt in that moment. Used, manipulated, betrayed by the one person I trusted most in the entire world. Tuesday morning, after my shift, I stopped by the public library before heading home. I needed to better understand how companies used tax strategies to justify certain expenses. I spent 2 hours researching terms like family assistance through business, tax benefits for CEOs, and shell accounts. The more I read, the more my suspicions solidified. There were dozens of legal and illegal ways a company could use a relative's name to move money around. If an elderly person didn't know their name was being used, it would be the perfect crime. I made a mental list. I needed documents, statements, official records. But how could I get them without raising suspicion? My first attempt was subtle. I called Luca on Wednesday, pretending I was worried about taxes. "Son, I'm organizing my tax return, and I need to know if that allowance you mentioned has any tax implications for me." Silence on the other end. "Dad, don't worry about it. Aubrey handles all the tax stuff. It's all taken care of." I pushed a little. "But I still need to report that income, don't I?" Another pause. "Dad, just leave it to me. Aubrey will send you whatever you need." I hung up, frustrated. They were clearly dodging concrete information. The first crack was confirmed. They didn't want me knowing the details. I never accuse without proof. That's always been my principle. But I also never ignore a suspicion. In 30 years as an accountant, I learned one thing. Numbers always tell the truth, even when people lie. If Luca was really sending me $12K a month, there had to be a trail somewhere. Not just in my bank account, which I already knew was clean, but in official records, notary documents, filings. Money of that magnitude doesn't just vanish. Either he was lying about sending it, or the money was going somewhere else under my name. Either option was unacceptable. On Thursday, I went to the civil registry office. I explained to the clerk that I needed to check if there were any documents filed under my name that I might have forgotten about. She walked me through the process of requesting a full certificate. "It'll show everything, Mr. Thompson. Any documents, business records, power of attorney. Takes 3 business days." I paid the fee and walked out with a mix of anxiety and determination. In 3 days, I'd have a full view of how my name had been used. If something was being hidden, it would show up there. It was my first real move in the search for the truth. All weekend, the anxiety was unbearable. Dorothy noticed how tense I was during our usual Sunday walk after church. "Gerald, you need to get ready mentally," she said, with the wisdom of someone who's lived through a lot. "If your suspicions turn out to be true, it'll change everything between you two." She was right. Part of me still hoped I was wrong, that this was just a misunderstanding. But the rational side of me, shaped by decades of dealing with numbers and documents, knew something very serious was going on. I braced myself for the kind of discovery that could destroy my relationship with my son forever. Monday came, and before picking up the documents, I made a visit that would change everything. I went to the office of Dr. Marcus Webb, a corporate attorney Dorothy had recommended. I explained the entire situation: Luca's public announcement, the missing money, the evasive answers, and my suspicions about the misuse of my name. Dr. Webb listened carefully, taking notes. "Mr. Thompson, based on what you're telling me, there's a real possibility that your name is being used in financial transactions without your consent. If that's confirmed, there could be criminal consequences." My stomach twisted. "Criminal? What exactly does that mean, doctor?" He adjusted his glasses and got straight to the point. "If someone is using your name to open accounts, move money, or justify company expenses without your authorization, that qualifies as fraud, identity falsification, and possibly tax evasion. Depending on the amounts involved, we're talking about crimes that can lead to prison." I felt the blood freeze in my veins. "But he's my son, doctor." He shook his head solemnly. "Mr. Thompson, the law doesn't care about family ties when it comes to financial fraud. If he committed crimes using your name, the consequences are the same, whether he's your son or a stranger." Reality was growing darker than I had imagined. Dr. Webb laid out the next steps. "First, we need those registry documents to confirm if there are any records under your name. Then, we'll request bank statements from all accounts linked to your Social Security number. If we find irregularities, I'll advise you to document everything before confronting your son. In cases like this, it's common for the parties involved to try to destroy evidence once they know they've been found out." He handed me his card. "Call me as soon as you have the documents. And Mr. Thompson, be prepared. If your suspicions are correct, your life is going to change drastically in the next few weeks." I walked out of that office with shaky legs, but more determined than ever to uncover the truth. That Monday afternoon, I picked up the documents from the registry office. My hands were trembling as I opened the envelope in the parking lot. And there it was, the first concrete clue. A power of attorney filed in my name, signed 2 years and 4 months ago, giving Aubrey permission to manage bank accounts for family assistance purposes. The signature looked like mine, but I had no memory of ever signing anything like that. Below that, another document. The opening of a checking account at Comerica Bank under my name, with Aubrey listed as the authorized representative. My world collapsed in that moment. It was real. They were actually using my name for some kind of financial scheme. I called Dr. Webb immediately and scheduled an emergency meeting. I showed him the documents, and his expression grew more serious with every page. "Mr. Thompson, this is very serious. If you didn't knowingly sign this power of attorney, then we're looking at document forgery. And this bank account, we'll need the statements to understand the transactions." He picked up the phone right in front of me and called Comerica Bank. "I need the last 2 years of statements for the account of Gerald Thompson," he said, identifying himself as my attorney. They'll be ready tomorrow. The second crack was confirmed. Not only were they using my name, they had likely forged my signature. That night, I could barely focus at work. The forklift felt heavier, the pallets harder to handle. My co-workers could tell something was off, but how could I explain that I just found out my own son might be a criminal? During a break, I called Dorothy from a payphone. "Dorothy, you were right. I found documents proving they opened a bank account in my name." She sighed heavily. "Oh my God, Gerald. What are you going to do?" "I'm going all the way," I said, with a firmness that even surprised me. "I don't care if he's my son. I'm not going to be an accomplice to anything illegal." Tuesday morning, Dr. Webb called me in urgently. The bank statements showed an alarming pattern. Monthly deposits of exactly $12,000, always on the 15th, followed by withdrawals and transfers to Luca's company accounts. In 2 years, over $280,000 had moved through an account I didn't even know existed. "Mr. Thompson, this isn't just misuse of your name," Dr. Webb explained. "This is money laundering using your identity. They deposited the money under the guise of family assistance, but in practice it was financing the business." The scale of the fraud left me speechless. My own flesh and blood had turned me into a financial puppet. I never imagined the day would come when I'd have to investigate my own son like he was just another stranger. But the numbers didn't lie. For decades as an accountant, I'd seen schemes like this. Business owners using family members to justify expenses, lower taxes, or hide suspicious transactions. The difference now was that I was the victim. Dr. Webb explained that technically, I was responsible for all the taxes generated by that account, even if I didn't know it existed. "If the IRS finds this before we correct it, you could be charged with tax evasion." The irony was brutal, the honest accountant being used to dodge taxes. The weight of that discovery was crushing, but in a strange way, also freeing. I finally had solid answers. Luca wasn't being generous. He was using me as a front to funnel money through his company. Aubrey wasn't just a quiet daughter-in-law. She was the technical executor of a complex tax fraud operation. And I, the proud father who admired his son's success, was nothing more than a disposable piece in a much dirtier game. Dr. Webb interrupted my thoughts. "Mr. Thompson, now that we have the evidence, we need to decide how to proceed. Do we confront them directly, or report this to the authorities?" The hardest decision of my life was staring me in the face. The rest of that week was an emotional roller coaster. Anger, sadness, disappointment, disgust. It all swirled inside me in an unbearable mess. How does a father turn his own son in? How does an honest man live with the fact that he was used to commit crimes? The nights at the warehouse became endless. Every forklift load gave me time to think, and thinking hurt. Dorothy tried to comfort me. "Gerald, you didn't choose this. They did this to you." But the fatherly guilt lingered. Had I been a bad father? Had I failed to pass on the right values? Dr. Sigh. Webb advised me to document everything before taking any action. "We need more evidence on how they got your signature, how they justified the expenses, and whether other forged documents exist." We spent 2 weeks gathering information. We found that the account had been used to pay for fake family consulting, non-existent technical support, and fabricated logistics assistance. It was way too sophisticated to be improvised. They had planned it carefully. My admiration for Luca's intelligence turned into horror at his calculated dishonesty. The final confirmation came from an unexpected source. While researching at the library, I found articles about Luca's startup in local business journals. In one piece from 6 months ago, he spoke about family support as a competitive advantage, and mentioned that investing in family is investing in the company's future. Between the lines, he was practically confessing the scheme in public, dressing it up as business philosophy. His arrogance floored me. Not only had they used me, but they had bragged about it in the press, counting on the fact I'd never read those kinds of publications. Dr. Webb was impressed by the find. "Mr. Thompson, they've documented their own crime. This will make our case much easier." He laid out the legal options: criminal charges, civil lawsuit, or a direct confrontation with an ultimatum. "Which would you prefer?" I thought for a long moment. I've never been one to avoid necessary confrontation, even when it hurts. I want to confront them first. Give them a chance to confess and try to make things right. Dr. Webb agreed, but with one condition. We're doing this officially, with witnesses. If they lie or try to cover it up, we go straight to legal action. We scheduled the confrontation for the following Friday. Dr. Webb would call Luca and Aubrey, explaining that I had discovered financial irregularities involving my name and needed urgent clarification. He wouldn't mention any details, just that it was a serious legal matter. The meeting would be held at the lawyer's office with authorized recording at 2 p.m. When Dr. Webb made the calls, I could hear the panic in their voices. "What kind of irregularities?" Luca asked. "Your father will explain in person," Dr. Webb replied coldly. The countdown had begun. In 3 days, the whole truth would come out. I spent those 3 days in a mix of anxiety and determination. Part of me still hoped there was an innocent explanation, that it was all just a bureaucratic misunderstanding. But the rational part of me knew I was about to confront 2 criminals who had used my fatherly trust to commit fraud. During my night shifts, I kept imagining how the conversation would go. Would they deny it, lie, or finally confess and ask for forgiveness? Any of those scenarios felt too surreal to be real. On Thursday night, the eve of the confrontation, Dorothy came over for dinner. I made a simple sandwich and coffee, and we talked about life, about family, about disappointments. "Gerald, no matter what happens tomorrow, remember that you did the right thing. A father can love his son, but he can't condone crimes." Her words gave me the strength I needed. That night, for the first time in weeks, I slept deeply. I was sure that the next day, the whole truth would finally come to light. On Friday morning, I put on my best suit, a navy blue one I had saved for special occasions. I looked at myself in the mirror and saw a tired 68-year-old man, but one who was resolute. In a few hours, I would confront my own son with evidence that he had used me to commit financial crimes. It was the hardest moment of my life, but also the most necessary. I drove to Dr. Webb's office feeling like I was heading to a trial. I just didn't know if I was the judge or the one being judged. I arrived at the office an hour early. Dr. Webb reviewed all the documents with me: the forged power of attorney, the bank statements, the newspaper articles, the proof of suspicious transactions. "Mr. Thompson, remember, let them speak first. We want to hear their version before we present the evidence." At 1:45 p.m., I got a call. It was Luca, saying they were on their way, but asking if I really needed a lawyer to handle a family matter. The question alone confirmed that they knew exactly what this was about. The final confrontation was about to begin. At exactly 2 p.m., Luca and Aubrey walked into Dr. Webb's office. My son wore a flawless suit and his usual confident expression, but I could see a subtle tension around his eyes. Aubrey looked as elegant as ever, but her hands betrayed her nerves as she kept adjusting the strap of her purse. They greeted Dr. Webb formally and gave me kisses on the cheek like it was a normal family meeting. "Hi, Dad. Are you okay?" "Why all the formality?" Luca asked with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Aubrey stayed silent, but her eyes scanned the room quickly, as if looking for clues about what was coming. Dr. Webb got straight to the point, maintaining a neutral, professional tone. "Mr. Luca, Ms. Aubrey, your father came to me after discovering some financial irregularities involving his name. We'd like clarification regarding a bank account at Comerica Bank and a power of attorney filed at the registry office." The mood in the room shifted instantly. I saw the color drain from Aubrey's face, just like it had at Christmas, but this time, even more intensely. Luca tried to keep his composure, but his jaw clenched visibly. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, though his voice sounded less convincing than usual. "Dad, what is this?" Aubrey finally spoke, turning directly to me with a tone that blended forced surprise and genuine nervousness. "Why didn't you talk to us first before getting a lawyer involved?" It was a clear attempt to make me feel guilty, to frame the situation as if I was the problem. Luca quickly added, "Dad, if there's some misunderstanding about the allowance I've been sending you, we can sort it out as a family. There was no need for all this." They were trying to control the narrative, to make it seem like I was overreacting, that it was just a simple family miscommunication. I kept my voice calm but firm. Decades of dealing with business owners trying to spin their way out of trouble had taught me not to be swayed by charm or emotional manipulation. Luca, I called my bank. I've never received any $12,000 allowance, not a cent. So I need to understand where that money is going, because clearly it's not coming to me. The silence that followed was deafening. Father and son glanced at each other for just a split second, but I caught it clearly. They knew they'd been caught. Aubrey tried a new approach, stepping into her role as the tax expert. Father-in-law, sometimes those transfers go through intermediary accounts for tax optimization. It's possible the money is in an investment account under your name that you're not aware of. It was a plausible explanation for someone who didn't know finance, but to a former accountant, it sounded like complete fabrication. Dr. Webb stepped in politely. Ms. Aubrey, could you provide us with the bank name and account number? That way we can check it right away. She hesitated, fingers nervously tapping the table. I would have to check the records at the office. Luca saw that vague explanations weren't working and switched tactics. He took on a more aggressive posture, as if he were the one being wronged. Dad, honestly, I'm disappointed in you. I work hard building a company. I try to help my family financially, and you accuse me of, what, exactly? Theft? Fraud? His voice rose slightly, a clear attempt at emotional intimidation. After everything I've done for you, after all the support I've given, this is how you treat me. Hiring a lawyer to interrogate me like I'm some kind of criminal? It was a classic guilt flip move, making the accuser feel guilty for daring to question the accused. Dr. Webb kept control of the situation with his calm, professional demeanor. Mr. Luca, no one is accusing anyone of anything, yet. We're simply trying to clarify where the money you publicly stated you've been sending to your father is going. If it's truly being sent, it should be easy to verify with documents. Luca shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Of course it can be verified. But I'm not going to sit here and be treated like a suspect. If my father doesn't trust me, maybe I should stop helping him financially altogether. It was a veiled threat, trying to make me back down out of fear of losing support I'd ironically never actually received. That was the moment I saw my son for who he really was. Not the successful, generous entrepreneur I admired, but a skilled manipulator, used to getting his way through charm and intimidation. Aubrey stayed silent, probably calculating the legal implications of everything. Dr. Webb continued to press, still polite but firm. So, can you provide us with proof of the transfers from the past 2 years? Bank statements, receipts, any documentation confirming the payments? Luca and Aubrey exchanged another glance, and I saw the panic rising in their eyes. They knew they couldn't produce documents that didn't exist. I'll need a few days to gather all that, Luca finally said, trying to buy time. That's 2 years of records. I don't have it all memorized. Dr. Webb didn't flinch. I understand, Mr. Luca, but in the meantime we need clarification about a power of attorney and a bank account that were registered under your father's name. Are you aware of these documents? The question hit like a blow. I saw Aubrey swallow hard and Luca blinking rapidly, clear signs of anxiety. What power of attorney? He asked, trying to sound genuinely surprised, but his performance was falling apart fast. Dr. Webb opened a folder and laid copies of the documents on the table. The forged power of attorney and the bank account registration were right there, in black and white. These documents, Mr. Luca. Your wife is listed as your father's representative for banking activity. The room went completely silent. Aubrey turned white as chalk, and her hands visibly trembled. Luca reached for the papers to examine them, but even his hands weren't steady. It felt like watching two people being confronted with evidence of a crime they thought they had perfectly hidden. This must be some mistake, Aubrey stammered, showing her first real sign of panic. Maybe I signed something at the bank without fully understanding what it was. It was a weak, desperate defense. Luca tried to back her up. Aubrey handles a lot of paperwork for the business and the family. It's possible there was some sort of bureaucratic mix-up. But even he didn't seem convinced by his own words. Dr. Webb remained unfazed. Mr. Thompson, do you recall signing this power of attorney or authorizing the opening of this account? All eyes turned to me, waiting for the answer that would seal their fate. I looked straight into the eyes of my son, the man I had raised, educated, loved unconditionally for 38 years. No, I said, with a firmness that even surprised me. I've never seen these documents before in my life. I never authorized anyone to use my name to open a bank account. And I certainly never received a single cent of the supposed $12,000 a month you claimed publicly to be sending me. The truth had been spoken, clearly and definitively. There was no running from it now. I saw tears forming in Aubrey's eyes, and Luca's mask of confidence finally crumbled completely. Dr. Webb ended the meeting with professional authority. Well, we're looking at a very serious situation here. Misuse of identity, possible document forgery, unauthorized financial activity. I'm giving you 48 hours to provide a convincing explanation and full documentation. Otherwise, we'll have no choice but to proceed with legal action. Luca and Aubrey stood up in silence, visibly shaken. As they left, they didn't even say a proper goodbye. The son I once knew was gone, replaced by a stranger who had used my fatherly trust to commit financial crimes. After they walked out, Dr. Webb turned to me with a grave expression. Mr. Thompson, they weren't able to explain anything. In fact, their reactions only confirmed our suspicions. I think we need to prepare for the next step. Strangely, despite the pain of betrayal, I felt a sense of peace. The truth was finally beginning to surface. Do what needs to be done, doctor. I don't care that he's my son. I can't be complicit in crimes. It was a statement that tore at my heart, but my conscience demanded it. Can you imagine the pain of realizing you've been betrayed by the person you trusted most in the world? I drove home that afternoon with conflicting emotions. Sadness over losing the illusion I had of my son. Anger over the manipulation I'd endured. But also relief. Relief that I finally knew the truth. For 68 years, I've believed that honesty and integrity are non-negotiable values. Even if it meant sacrificing the most important family bond I had, I couldn't give up the principles that guided my entire life. The confrontation had confirmed my worst fears, but it had also freed me from the doubts that had haunted me for weeks. Now I knew exactly what I was fighting against, and I was determined to fight to the very end. That night, before heading to work, I called Dorothy and told her about the meeting. She listened in silence, then let out a deep sigh. Gerald, I'm so sorry your suspicions turned out to be true. But you did the right thing. A father can love his son, but that love can't become complicity in a crime. Her words echoed in my mind throughout the night shift. I had lost the son I thought I knew, but I had kept my moral integrity. For a 68-year-old man who always prided himself on his honesty, that was a bitter victory, but a necessary one. The final battle was approaching, and I was ready for it. During the night shift, operating the forklift in the warehouse's quiet darkness, I reflected on the choices ahead. In 48 hours, I would have to make a decision that would change my life forever. Press criminal charges against my own son, or accept some kind of settlement. Part of me still hoped Luca and Aubrey would show up with a believable explanation, that this had all somehow been a terrible misunderstanding. But the rational part of me, shaped by decades of experience with numbers and documents, knew that was impossible. They had used me, lied, forged my signature, and moved hundreds of thousands of dollars in my name. There was no innocent explanation for any of it. The clock was still ticking, and I was getting ready for the final confrontation. That night felt quieter than usual, like the whole world was holding its breath, waiting for this story to reach its conclusion. In just a few hours, I'd find out if my son would tell one last lie, confess, and ask for forgiveness, or vanish, hoping I wouldn't have the strength to go through with it. But no matter what choice he made, I had already made mine. No matter the pain it would cause me, the truth had to prevail. At 68 years old, driving home as the sun rose over Plano, Texas, I knew I was about to face the hardest day of my life. But I also knew it would be the day I finally made justice happen. When I got home, I found an envelope under my door. It was a handwritten letter from Luca. Dad, we need to talk. Please call me before you do anything irreversible. I can explain everything. I read those lines over and over, searching for any trace of sincerity or genuine remorse. But all I could see were the words of someone desperate to buy time, someone trying to manipulate me one last time. I carefully set the letter aside. It would be yet another piece of evidence for Dr. Webb. The cat and mouse game was nearing its end, and my son still hadn't realized that this time, the mouse had become the hunter. I lay down in bed that morning, knowing that when I woke up, everything was about to change for good. In less than 48 hours, I would either have a confession from my son, along with a sincere effort to make things right, or I'd be signing a criminal complaint against him. There was no middle ground left. The truth had taken on a life of its own and couldn't be contained any longer. I closed my eyes and, for the first time in weeks, felt a strange sense of peace. No matter how painful the end of this story would be, at least it would be an honest one. And for a man who had spent his entire life valuing honesty above all else, that meant that no matter the consequences, I would come out of this with my integrity intact. When the phone rang at 3 p.m, waking me from a deep sleep, I instinctively knew it was Dr. Webb. "Mr. Thompson," they called. "They want another meeting tonight. They say they have important explanations. Are you ready?" I looked out the window and saw the bright Texas sun lighting up my small, humble apartment, and I felt an unshakable determination rise within me. "I'm ready, doctor. Whatever their explanation is, I want to hear it. But if it's another attempt at deception, we go straight to the authorities." The final confrontation could no longer be postponed. The truth demanded justice, and I was ready to deliver it, no matter what it cost my father's heart. At exactly 7 p.m., Luca and Aubrey entered Dr. Webb's office once again, but this time, the atmosphere was completely different. It was clear they'd spent the last few hours rehearsing some sort of performance. They came in with neatly organized folders and carefully curated expressions of confidence. Luca wore an even more expensive suit than last time, as if clothing could mask the seriousness of the situation. Aubrey carried a leather folder and a laptop, stepping into her role as the competent tax consultant. "Dad, thank you for giving us this opportunity to clear everything up," Luca said with a forced smile. "We brought all the documentation you asked for." Dr. Webb gestured for them to sit down, and as always got straight to the point with his usual professional authority. "Very well, let's hear your explanation. We'd like to understand first about the $12,000 a month that Mr. Luca publicly stated he's been sending to his father." Luca opened his folder with theatrical flair, pulling out several printed documents. "Here are the transfer receipts from the past 2 years, he said, handing the papers to Dr. Webb confidently. "As you can see, we've transferred exactly $12,000 each month into an investment account under my father's name." Dr. Webb examined the papers carefully, cross-referencing them with the documents we had collected during our investigation. "Interesting," he said after several minutes of silent review. "These receipts show transfers to an account at Comerica Bank, account number 44728891. That's the exact same account listed in the documents we obtained from the registry office." Luca smiled triumphantly, as if he'd just won a chess match. "Exactly. See? Everything documented and legal. Dad, the money was always there, in an investment account." Aubrey took over the explanation, leaning into her tax expertise to add credibility to the carefully crafted lie they had prepared. "Father-in-law, when Luca decided to help you financially, I suggested setting up an investment structure to maximize the returns. The account was opened with a precautionary power of attorney, a common practice in advanced family financial planning. The funds are automatically invested and generate compound interest." She showed colorful spreadsheets on her laptop, charts with returns, future projections. "In 2 years, your $12,000 per month has grown to nearly $320,000 with interest." "Ms. Aubrey," Dr. Webb interrupted, his voice calm but cutting through her elaborate presentation like a scalpel. "Mr. Thompson has clearly stated that he never signed any power of attorney, nor authorized the opening of any account. How do you explain that?" The first crack in Aubrey's composure appeared. Her professional mask began to slip. She blinked repeatedly and adjusted her glasses nervously. "Well, it was signed over 2 years ago. Maybe he just forgot, due to his age. Sometimes older people." She didn't finish the sentence, realizing too late that she was digging herself into an even deeper hole. It was my turn to speak, and I had mentally prepared for this moment through weeks of anguish. "Son, I'm 68, not 88. My memory is perfectly fine, and I would never sign a power of attorney without reading every word and understanding every clause in full. After 30 years as a public accountant, I've learned that signing a document is no small thing. My voice came out firm and steady, without a single tremble. And besides, if there really was an account with $300,000 in my name, I would be legally required to report it on my tax return. Dr. Webb seized the moment to present the first piece of hard evidence that would completely dismantle their story. Since we're talking about documentation, let me show you something very interesting we discovered during our investigation. He opened a folder and pulled out an official letterhead bearing the seal of a handwriting expert. This is a forensic handwriting analysis comparing the signature on the power of attorney with verified authentic signatures of Mr. Thompson. He laid the document on the table with quiet authority. The report is conclusive. The signature was forged. The pen pressure, the angle of the letters, everything is inconsistent. I watched the blood drain from Luca and Aubrey's faces simultaneously, like someone had flipped a switch. It was like watching two people realize they'd just been caught red-handed in a serious crime. Luca made one last desperate move, shifting into a combative stance that revealed his true character. "This is absurd. You're inventing a conspiracy that doesn't exist. My father is being manipulated by this lawyer who's just trying to make money off our family." He shot up from his chair, pointing a shaking finger at Dr. Webb with growing panic. "Sit down, Luca." My voice sliced through the air like a razor, stopping his theatrics cold. "You will not disrespect me or Dr. Webb in this office." He looked at me, stunned, probably the first time he had ever heard me speak to him in that tone of authority. "For 2 hours, I've listened to you try to convince me that I forgot signing documents, that I'm too old to understand my own finances. That ends now." I stood and looked my son straight in the eyes. "You lied to me. You forged my signature. You used my name to move hundreds of thousands of dollars." That's when Dr. Webb revealed the second devastating piece of evidence, one that would seal their fate for good. "Mr. Luca, we also have the full bank statements from the Comerica account for the last 2 years." He spread dozens of pages across the table in methodical order. Interesting to note, the $12,000 deposited each month were not left to accrue interest as you falsely claimed. In fact, they were immediately transferred to accounts belonging to your company, Tech Logistics Solutions LLC. Each page showed the same criminal pattern. A $12,000 deposit, held for 24 to 48 hours, then completely transferred to the company's accounts. That's when Aubrey broke completely. Her professional composure evaporated like smoke in the air. Her hands trembled uncontrollably, and her voice came out cracked, nearly inaudible. We never meant to actually hurt anyone. The company was in serious trouble. We needed urgent working capital. It was the partial confession we'd been waiting for. Luca had the idea to use a family account to justify the cash flow as parental assistance. It was supposed to be temporary. We were going to pay it all back once the business stabilized financially. Temporary? My voice jumped an octave, revealing the full weight of the indignation I'd been carrying through weeks of painful discoveries. 2 years is temporary. $300,000 is temporary. I looked at Aubrey with a mix of deep disappointment and controlled fury. "You have a degree in accounting. You know perfectly well this is embezzlement, document forgery, and tax fraud. And you had the audacity to treat me like I was too senile to understand." The mask of professional competence had completely fallen, revealing a desperate woman who had knowingly taken part in an elaborate criminal scheme. Dr. Webb presented the third and most damning piece of evidence, one that would eliminate any last shred of possible defense. "We also have records from the IRS showing that you declared the amounts transferred to Mr. Thompson's account as deductible family assistance, which significantly lowered your company's taxes." He laid out copies of Tech Logistics tax filings, marked in red. "At the same time, you knew Mr. Thompson wasn't declaring that money as income, because he never knew it existed. It was the final blow, clear, undeniable proof of large-scale tax evasion." That's when Luca finally collapsed, completely losing the composure he'd struggled to maintain through the entire meeting. The mask of the successful entrepreneur and dutiful son fell apart in front of us. Fine. We did it, okay?" He ran his hands through his hair in desperation, like a cornered animal. The company was falling apart. We were about to lose everything we built. We lost key contracts, investors pulled out, we needed a quick solution. His words spilled out in a frantic mess, a full confession, driven by the panic of someone who knew they'd been caught red-handed. "And the public announcement at Christmas?" I asked, feeling a cold rage bubbling up inside me like volcanic lava. "Why did you stand in front of the whole family and say you were sending me $12,000 a month?" Luca lowered his head, unable to meet my eyes. It was to maintain a social and professional image. Some investors were there. I had to show I was a responsible family man, someone who takes care of his own. The final truth was even more sordid than I had imagined. They hadn't just stolen from me. They had used my exploitation as a marketing tool. Dr. Webb took full control of the situation with his unwavering professional authority. "Very well. We now have complete confessions of document forgery, embezzlement, tax evasion, and identity misuse. Mr. Thompson, how would you like to proceed legally?" The moment of final decision had arrived, after weeks of mental preparation. I had spent every day readying myself for this question. I looked at my son, the man I had raised, taught, loved unconditionally, and saw a stranger who had used my trust to commit serious crimes. "Doctor, I want every legal measure taken against them," I replied with a firmness that even surprised me. "I want them to return every cent they stole, pay every penny in taxes they evaded, plus interest and penalties, and face criminal charges for every one of their actions." Luca's reaction was immediate and desperate, like a child caught red-handed. "Dad, please. I'm your son. You can't do this to us." He tried to kneel in front of me, but I instinctively stepped back. "I can, and I will. You stopped being my son the moment you decided to use me." Dr. Webb ended the meeting with his unwavering professional authority. "Mr. Luca, Ms. Aubrey, you have the right to legal counsel. I strongly advise you to retain legal representation immediately. Tomorrow morning we will be filing a criminal complaint for document forgery, embezzlement, and tax evasion." Then he turned to me. "Mr. Thompson, we will also be filing a civil suit for full restitution, monetary correction, and moral damages." It was the final end. My own son would walk out of that office a confessed criminal, and I would walk out as a man who chose justice over blood ties. As they left in silence, heads down and completely defeated, I felt a complex wave of deep relief and overwhelming sadness. The truth had finally prevailed after weeks of investigation and pain, but at an emotionally devastating cost. "Dr. Webb placed a hand on my shoulder in a gesture of support. "Mr. Thompson, I know this was incredibly hard, but you did the right thing. No one, not even family, has the right to use our trust to commit crimes." I knew he was absolutely right, but it didn't lessen the searing pain of having lost my son forever. The first consequence came faster than I expected. The next morning, before my alarm even went off at 9, the phone wouldn't stop ringing. It was Dorothy, clearly shaken, telling me she'd seen a story on the local news site. "Gerald, honey, it's front page in the business section. Startup CEO reported by his own father for tax fraud." My stomach tightened. I hadn't expected the story to leak to the press so quickly. The public exposure had begun, and there was no turning back. In the days that followed, the fallout grew rapidly. Webb informed me that the IRS had launched a formal investigation. 2 investors pulled their funding, and Luca was removed from his position as CEO. The destruction of his reputation unfolded systematically. Stories appeared in the Dallas Morning News, Austin Business Journal, even TechCrunch. "Promising CEO accused of using elderly father as a front in tax scheme," read one headline. Former employees started speaking out on social media. "I always knew something was off with the numbers," said one laid-off developer. 2 weeks after the report, Luca and Aubrey were taken into custody, charged with criminal conspiracy, aggravated fraud, and tax evasion. Dr. Webb told me, bail set at $200,000 each, which they can't afford. Tech Logistics filed for bankruptcy, and their assets were ordered to be auctioned off. Worse yet, the investigation uncovered they'd used other family members too, uncles, cousins, even Aubrey's grandmother. They had siphoned over $1 million using relatives' identities. My case had exposed a much bigger web of family fraud. 6 months later, at the criminal trial, I had to testify against my own son in court. That was the hardest moment of this entire journey, sitting in the witness box and describing how he forged my signature. Luca stared at me from the defendant's bench, but his eyes held no remorse, only resentment. The judge was stern and direct. 5 years for Luca, 3 for Aubrey, plus full restitution. This court does not tolerate crimes that exploit family trust, the magistrate declared. The Department of Justice later sent me an official letter, informing me that my report had led to the recovery of $1.2 million in unpaid taxes. Your courage resulted in one of the largest tax recoveries this year in family fraud cases, it read. Your case will be used in training programs for federal agents. My personal pain had become a tool to protect others. I received letters from people thanking me for exposing this kind of abuse. My case became legal precedent in Texas, now cited in other family fraud proceedings. Today, 2 years later, I still work the night shift on the forklift at age 70. Not because I need to, I got every cent back, but because the work gives me purpose. Luca is serving his sentence in prison. We haven't spoken since the trial. Aubrey was deported after completing hers. The most important lesson I learned: financial manipulation within families is more common than we think. Children often see elderly parents as easy targets, but family is no excuse for dishonesty. When someone we love betrays us, the only dignified choice is to stand by the truth, even if it breaks your heart. Now I'm curious about you, the one who heard my story. What would you have done in my place? Have you ever gone through something similar? Drop a comment down below and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Meanwhile, I'm leaving one of the channel's most powerful stories on the end screen. You won't believe how it ends. Thanks for watching.